The house was quiet when Cynthia came home. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels wrong, like the air itself is holding something back. She stood in the doorway of their home in Weybridge, her suitcase still in her hand, and listened. No music. No television. No sound of John moving around upstairs, restless the way he always was when he was trying to write. She'd been gone for 10 days. Greece. A holiday with some friends, trying to remember what it felt like to exist outside the shadow of being Mrs. John Lennon. He'd encouraged her to go. Insisted, actually. Said she needed a break. Said he'd be fine. Said he had some work to do anyway, some recording, some thinking. She should have known then. Should have heard the way his voice changed when he talked about her leaving. Too eager. Too insistent. But she'd wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that maybe, finally, they were finding their way back to something that felt like a marriage, instead of a performance. She set her suitcase down, walked through the living room. Everything looked normal. The furniture was where it always was. John's books scattered on the coffee table, his guitar leaning against the wall. But something was off. She couldn't name it. Just a feeling in her chest, tightening. John? No answer. She walked toward the stairs. That's when she heard it. A voice. Not John's. Higher. Unfamiliar, coming from upstairs, from the bedroom. Cynthia stopped at the bottom of the stairs, her hand on the railing, her heart starting to hammer in a way that had nothing to do with the climb. She should have turned around. Should have left. Should have gotten back in the car and driven away and never asked what was happening in that room. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because some part of her, the part that had been watching her marriage dissolve for months, watching John drift further and further away, needed to see it. Needed to know. She climbed the stairs, each step deliberate. Slow, the voice got clearer. A woman's voice, speaking quietly. Then John's voice, soft, intimate. The way he used to talk to her years ago, before the fame and the drugs and the distance. Cynthia reached the bedroom door. It was open, just slightly, enough to see inside. John was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, his back against the bed. He was wearing the white robe he'd bought in India, the one he'd been obsessed with for weeks. His hair was longer than she'd ever seen it, falling into his eyes. He looked different, thinner, older, like someone she used to know but didn't anymore. Next to him, also on the floor, also in white, was a woman. Small, dark hair. Sitting so close to John, their shoulders were touching. She was talking, her hands moving as she spoke, and John was watching her like she was the only person who'd ever said anything worth listening to. Yoko Ono. Cynthia knew who she was. Everyone in their circle knew. The artist. The avant-garde one. The one who'd been showing up at galleries and events, always in the background, always watching. John had mentioned her a few times. Casually. Too casually. Said she was interesting. Said she had ideas. Said she understood art in a way most people didn't. Cynthia had smiled and nodded and told herself it didn't mean anything. Women were always interested in John. That was the price of being married to a Beatle. You learned to live with it. You learned to trust that at the end of the day, he came home to you. Except now, he hadn't. Now home was where he'd brought her. Cynthia pushed the door open. They both looked up. John's face went white. Not guilty, not embarrassed. Just blank. Like he'd been caught doing something he knew was wrong, but hadn't figured out how to feel about it yet. Yoko didn't move. She just looked at Cynthia with these dark, calm eyes. No surprise. No shame. just looking. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was so heavy, it pressed against Cynthia's ribs, making it hard to breathe. "Sin," John finally said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You're home early." She laughed. It came out sharp and broken. "That's what you're going to say?" He stood up slowly. Yoko stayed on the floor, watching. "I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow. I changed my flight." "Why?" The question hung in the air. Why? Like it mattered. Like the reason she came home early was more important than what she'd found when she got there. "I missed you," Cynthia said. Her voice cracked. "I missed my husband." John looked down. His hands were shaking. "Sin, don't." She held up her hand. "Don't say my name like that, like you're trying to calm me down, like I'm being unreasonable." "You're not being unreasonable. Then what am I being, John? What is this?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, trapped between two women, two versions of himself, two futures he couldn't have at the same time. Yoko stood up. She moved slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the door, toward Cynthia. For a second, Cynthia thought she was going to say something. Apologize, maybe. Explain. But Yoko just looked at her, really looked at her, and then walked past, down the stairs, out of the room. They could hear her footsteps on the stairs. Then the front door opening, closing. Then silence again. John sat down on the bed, put his head in his hands. Cynthia stood in the doorway. She felt like she was watching this happen to someone else, like she was floating somewhere above her own body, looking down at this woman in a doorway, this man on a bed, this marriage ending in real time. "How long?" she asked. "Sin." "How long, John?" He took a breath. "A few months. A few months." She repeated it, testing the words, seeing how they felt. They felt like knives. "You've been sleeping with her for months." "It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" He looked up at her. His eyes were red. "It's..." "She understands things. Things I can't explain. Things I didn't even know I was feeling until she said them out loud." Cynthia felt something inside her crack. Not break. Not yet. Just crack. "And I don't?" "You do. You're wonderful, Sin. You've always been wonderful. But this is different." "Different how?" He struggled for words. She could see him trying to find the right way to say it, the way that would make it hurt less. But there wasn't one. There never was. "She sees me," he finally said. "Not the Beatle. Not the famous guy. Just me. The parts of me I don't show anyone else. The weird parts. The broken parts. And she doesn't try to fix them. She just sees them. And it's okay." Cynthia felt tears on her face. She hadn't realized she was crying. "I see you. I know you do. But it's not the same." "Because I love you?" John flinched. "Sin, please answer me. Is it because I love you? Because I've stood by you through everything? Because I gave up my life to be your wife and raise your son and smile for the cameras while you disappeared into whatever this is?" "It's not your fault." "Then whose fault is it, John? Mine for not being interesting enough? For not being weird enough? For being the person you married instead of the person you wish you'd met?" He didn't answer. And in that silence, Cynthia understood. It wasn't about fault. It wasn't about blame. It was just about the fact that he'd made a choice. Maybe not consciously, maybe not even deliberately, but he'd made it. And it wasn't her. She walked to the closet, started pulling out clothes. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the hangers. "What are you doing?" John asked. "Packing." "Sin, wait." "Wait for what? For you to tell me it's over? For you to explain how this is all somehow going to work out?" "Save it, John. I'm not an idiot." He stood up, came toward her. I don't want you to leave. She stopped, looked at him. You don't get to have both. I'm not asking for both. Then what are you asking for? And there it was. The question he couldn't answer. Because he didn't know. He wanted Cynthia gone. But he didn't want to be the one who sent her away. He wanted Yoko there. But he didn't want to admit what that meant. He wanted everything to somehow be okay, without anyone getting hurt, without consequences, without having to face what he was doing. Cynthia finished packing. One suitcase. Just the essentials. She could come back for the rest later. When he wasn't here. When she could breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in. She walked to the door. John followed her down the stairs, still talking. Still trying to find words that would make this something other than what it was. Sin. Please. Let's talk about this. Let's figure it out. She stopped at the front door. Turned to look at him one last time. He looked so young. So lost. Like a boy, playing at being a man, and suddenly realizing he didn't know the rules. You know what the worst part is? Cynthia said quietly. I'm not even surprised. Some part of me has been waiting for this. Waiting for you to find someone more interesting. More important. Someone who makes you feel like the person you think you are instead of the person you actually are. That's not fair. No, she said. It's not. None of this is fair. But it's true. She opened the door. The evening air was cool. The world outside looked normal. Cars driving by, birds in the trees, life continuing like nothing had changed. Where will you go? John asked. Does it matter? Of course it matters. She smiled. Broken. No, John. It doesn't. Not to you. Not anymore. She got in her car, started the engine, drove away. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back, she'd see him standing in the doorway, and some stupid part of her would want to turn around, would want to believe that this was fixable, that love was enough. But it wasn't. It never had been. The next day, John called Paul. They met at Paul's house, away from the press, away from the fans, away from anyone who would make this more complicated than it already was. Paul knew something was wrong the second he saw John's face. What happened? John told him. All of it. Cynthia coming home. The look on her face. The way she'd packed and left without screaming, without fighting, without giving him anything to push against. Paul listened. He didn't interrupt. When John finished, Paul was quiet for a long time. You love her? Paul finally asked. Not Cynthia, Yoko. I don't know. Maybe. I think so. You think so. It's complicated. Paul laughed. Dark. Everything with you is complicated, John. I didn't mean for this to happen. Yeah, well. It happened anyway. They sat in silence. The kind of silence that exists between people who've known each other too long to pretend. She's going to leave you, Paul said quietly. Cynthia. She's going to divorce you. Take Julian. And you're going to let her, because you're too caught up in whatever this is with Yoko to fight for them. John's jaw tightened. You don't know that. Don't I? You don't understand what this is. What Yoko and I have. It's different? Paul cut him off. Special? Yeah, I've heard it before. From every bloke who's ever cheated on his wife. It's always different. It's always special. Until it's not. This isn't cheating. What do you call it then? John didn't have an answer. Paul stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the garden, at the ordinary world that kept spinning no matter what happened in this room. You know what's going to happen, Paul said, his back still turned. The press is going to tear you apart. The fans are going to hate her. The other wives are going to be furious. And us, the band, we're going to have to deal with all of it. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've just lit a match and tossed it over your shoulder. And the rest of us are going to burn. John stood up. If you came here to make me feel worse, congratulations. Paul turned around. His face was tired. I didn't come here to make you feel anything. You called me. Remember? I'm just telling you what's going to happen. What's already happening. So what do you want me to do? Pretend Yoko doesn't exist? Go crawling back to Cynthia and pretend everything's fine? I want you to think about what you're doing, about who you're hurting, about what you're throwing away. I've thought about it. Have you, really? Or have you just decided what you want and convinced yourself it's the only way? The question hung between them. Heavy. True. John grabbed his jacket. I should go. Yeah, Paul said. You should. At the door, John stopped. Are you mad at me? Paul looked at him. Really looked at him. No, he said quietly. I'm sad for you, because I think you're about to lose a lot more than you realize. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. John left, drove through London in the dark, went back to the house in Weybridge that felt empty now, even though Yoko was there, even though she was sitting in the same spot on the floor where Cynthia had found them. She looked up when he came in. How did it go? About how you'd expect. She nodded, didn't ask for details. That was one of the things he liked about her. She didn't need explanations. She just accepted things as they were. He sat down next to her. The floor was hard. His back hurt. But he stayed there anyway. Do you think I did the right thing? He asked. Yoko was quiet for a moment. I don't think there is a right thing. Just the thing you choose. And then you live with it. And if I can't live with it, then you make a different choice. But what if there are no good choices? She looked at him. There never are, John. There's just what you can live with and what you can't. They sat in silence. Outside, the world was moving on. Cynthia was somewhere picking up the pieces. Paul was home, worrying. The other Beatles were probably hearing about it by now, wondering what it meant for the band, for the future, for everything they'd built. And John sat on the floor with a woman he barely knew, feeling like he'd just stepped off a cliff and was still waiting to find out if there was ground below or just empty air. The divorce took months. Cynthia got Julian. John got his freedom. The press had a field day. The fans sent death threats. Yoko was vilified in ways that went beyond criticism into pure hatred. But John stayed. Through all of it, through the anger, and the judgment, and the loss. He stayed, because walking away would mean admitting he'd destroyed his family for nothing. And he couldn't live with that. Years later, someone asked Cynthia if she'd forgiven him. She thought about it. About that day. About the look on his face when she'd opened the door. About the way he'd tried to explain something he didn't understand himself. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, she said. I think we just moved on. We had to. For Julian. For ourselves. You can't stay angry forever. It'll kill you. Do you think he was happy? With Yoko? Cynthia smiled. Sad. Knowing. I think he thought he would be. And maybe that was enough. The house in Weybridge was sold. Cynthia remarried. Julian grew up. The Beatles broke up. John and Yoko became John and Yoko, inseparable. Impossible to imagine one without the other. But sometimes, late at night, John would think about that moment. The door opening. Cynthia's face. The way everything had changed in the space of a heartbeat. He never said he regretted it. He couldn't. That would make everything that came after meaningless. But he wondered. In the quiet hours before dawn, when Yoko was asleep and he was alone with his thoughts, he wondered what would have happened if he'd made a different choice. If he'd sent Yoko away. If he'd fought for his family instead of his freedom. He'd never know. And maybe that was the point. Maybe life was just a series of doors opening and closing. And you walked through the ones you could live with. And you tried not to think too much about the ones you didn't. The silence in that bedroom, all those years ago, echoes still. Not in any record, not in any song, just in the space between what was and what might have been. And somewhere in that space, 3 people learned that love isn't always enough, that wanting something doesn't make it right, that the heart doesn't care about logic or fairness or who gets hurt. It just wants what it wants. And sometimes, that's the cruelest truth of all.